Moana, Tell with Moana this week. It's on Māori television, but I don't know if these are all going on Māori television or if they're doing some dedicated sort of online ones as well. So we've got a segment here that goes for 4 minutes talking about the RSB. They've done a little bit of a setup on it, and this is just where I'm choosing to pick up from because this is kind of when they get into the meaty stuff.
Imagine what human beings could do if they were free to do it for themselves without the politics and bureaucracy. And that's
It's funny how they need like taking borders, and like they never kind of consider that with issues that they think are woke. You know, we have to have lots of regulations around that. Any of those, no, those don't count. When we say freedom, we mean the freedoms that we agree with, not those other freedoms. They need to be squashed.
That's why the government that governs best is the government that governs less.
You didn't quite nail that, David. Why don't we give?
He didn't stick the landing, did he?
Didn't stick. We'll give you one more chance, Davey boy. Try and stick the landing this time.
For themselves without the politics and bureaucracy. And that's why the government that governs best is the government that governs less.
So what's wrong with that?
Well, if we think about many of the examples of when regulation was taken away,
Yes.
we see lots of consequences.
Yes.
Leaky buildings, right? Which we're still...
It's so funny. It's exactly what we talked about last night, like the hairdressers thing. So what's going to happen? So there'll be some hairdressers out there that will stop cleaning their stuff as well because they now don't have to. They're not going to get checked up on it. The places that there are going to be some hairdressers and barbers that are either less hygienic or if they have a busy Friday and can't kind of get around to being as hygienic as they should be, they won't worry about it because there's no repercussions. It's exactly what happens when you get rid of regulations.
Consequences. Leaky buildings, right? Which we're still dealing with in the schools and a whole pile of other places. Deaths in the forestry sector, mainly Māori deaths from not having proper health safety regulations there. Pike River, similar, not having inspections of mines, etc. Issues in the aged care homes. The finance company collapses because the finance companies could do what...
This sounds like a lovely future, doesn't it? With no regulation. Bring it on!
If they liked, and lots of people lost their pensions, funds and so on. And so we've seen what light-handed regulation actually means in practical terms. This government is talking in this mega sense about making that the norm.
But is there a middle ground that could be reached?
The problem is that ACT doesn't want a middle ground. ACT wants the end of the spectrum.
And this is exactly what we talked about last night, right? We were talking about, like we're talking about the health system. Can't we just can we get a bipartisan, sort of centrist, not centrist government, but like a middle part that we agree to in a bipartisan way? Yeah, and when you get in, you can stuff around the 10% around the edges, but you get one party like ACT who are like, it's my way or the highway. We've already heard from Chippy when he came on here that this government's idea of bipartisan is agree with us, and it can never happen. So even if one was going to be, what's the word? Generous, and say, well, let's come to an agreement together. ACT's position is, no, we want it this way. And that's what we're seeing.
This is ACT's fourth attempt to pass a bill knocked back in 2007, 2011 and 2021.
So the only way they're getting it into Parliament this time is through the back door of the coalition agreement, where National agreed to allow this not just to be introduced, but the legislation to be passed.
How come it failed back then?
When they've tried to pass this before, there's been a huge resistance, even from some of their fellow travellers. And so submissions to select committees were overwhelmingly opposed to these, but so were positions taken by the likes of the Treasury. I understand in this regulatory standards bill at present, there are quite a lot of people from the business community who don't support it either.
The majority of the 23,000 submissions on last year's consultation document weren't read by the Ministry of Regulation before proposals on next steps were taken to Cabinet. Of those that were read, it was revealed that only 0.33% supported the bill.
Think about that, whānau. 0.33%. So if there's 23,000, what would that be? 10% would be 2,300. So 1% would be 230. So a third of that would be 80. So of the 23,000, there were 80 that supported it. That would be 0.33%.
It's great to see that percentage put up over an image of at least 44 people.
Yeah. And I guess this would be also a time, and I'm sure we'll put it up as we go through, and I'm sure Kiwi Skirt will as well, of reminding everybody to do a submission. I'm certainly going to do one. There's been some of these submissions this year that I have done, some that I haven't done, but I'll definitely be doing one on this, and I think everybody should. Oh, I've been corrected. Sorry, it's not 80, it's 86, says Kiwi B. I'm sorry for my live math working count.
Less than 0.5%.
The proposed bill would measure any new policy or regulations against a set of core principles. What impact will that have on Te Tiriti and on Māori influence?
Well, no surprise that amongst the principles that ACT has proposed, Te Tiriti does not appear.
Surprised.
Which means that it's not amongst the main criteria that would have to be considered when bringing a new regulation into play. But also, it proposes setting up a board to which those who don't like regulations could complain that those regulations are not consistent with ACT-style principles that are in the ACT. And so Māori are not only invisible in the criteria in those principles, but anything that is done in favour of Māori risks being brought to this board. And of course the board would be appointed by the minister, who currently is David Seymour, and who can also issue guidelines about what does or doesn't come into the mix.
And of course, the very first person that will be appointed will be Richard Prebble. In fact, Rawiri this week was pretty clear that he believes he's left the Waitangi Tribunal so he can be appointed to this board, which also fills me with fear of the done deal or not Chewie. We hear New Zealand First was going to push back against some things. And look, honestly, if 1/3 of 1% of the people who submitted supported it last time, I suspect it'll be smaller, as hard as that sounds this time, because there does seem to be more of a fire this time around amongst the opponents to it. And if business isn't supporting it, and if the people aren't supporting it, and if Winston is kind of on it, if this does go through, this is not democracy. Whatever these fuckers say, and whatever they want to sell, and whatever they want to say about we have a mandate, this would be the opposite of democracy. Democracy doesn't mean you win enough seats and do whatever you want against the flow or the opinion of society. There can always be some things, 30-70, 60-40, but if it's less than 1% to more than 99% and you guys choose to do it,
that's not
God help you all. God help you all. That's all I can say. You think you've seen trouble with protests and stuff in the first 18 months? God help you all.
Like, this government has powered through basically by going, well, we won the election and therefore it's a mandate to do whatever we want. But when there's abject proof in that in the submissions from people that are motivated and care enough about this particular issue, like most bills that go to submission get a couple of hundred submissions from people that are heavily motivated, or it's the particular piece of law that is involved in their area of the expertise or something like that. But the Treaties Principle Bill got a hell of a lot of play. And I think the feeling here from ACT is they put that up almost as a straw man.
Yeah.
To sort of go, well, everybody will do this.
Divert.
They'll think they'll have achieved something. It's not really what we're about, because this guy with the boring name is the play. But I think people have been activated to push back against the treaty's principles bill because it's such a terrible piece of legislation. And they've stayed active and interested in that because people picked up on this before the treaty's principle bill was finished.
Yeah.
As it's like, guys, while I've got your attention, this
Yeah.
is the one.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And look,
I think
we didn't cover this very much in the kind of 3 or 4 months previously, but it was being talked about. But then as soon as it's got close to, I think we've hit it at just the right time. Getting Tanya on, getting Te Pāti Māori on to talk about it at just the right time. And this is the thing, right? I got a message from someone the other day saying, if the interest rates for mortgages keep going down, this government will get in again, because that's all that will matter to a lot of people. I also just want to wonder something. If we have a country that can get 300,000 submissions into a bill that was, as far as we know, was never going to progress, get those protests in the street like we've seen, and if we do a similar one on these submissions, how the hell can they get enough numbers to get elected again? Like, I don't understand how 300,000 people can submit to a bill that they think is you're trying to change the cornerstone, the founding document, the Magna Carta of New Zealand, so to speak, and then those people will not be as active to get to the polls in, let's be honest, 15, 16 months from now. It doesn't quite resonate with me. I don't quite understand it.
like I think I'm not rock solid on these numbers, but I remember seeing somewhere that it was something like 5,000 people that didn't vote. If they decide to vote, you've swung an election at that point. So how many people that were politically not engaged in the last election or the election before that or the election before that are now fired up and plugged in to push back against the treaty's principle bill, to push back against the RSB, that have maybe been activated by how fiery Te Pāti Māori or the Greens have been about this. How many of them are going to go into a voting booth next year and push back? Has this government's damn the torpedoes attitude and the fact that National have gone so hard and have not been tempered by their coalition partners, but have more been turbocharged to do more quicker, has shocked people into going, well, fuck, I can't sit this one out. Maybe it is important that I vote. Maybe this is the conversation that we need to be having with people. Maybe this is the conversation that people in the chat need to be having with people around them, as I'm sure they already are. Right. I think next election is really interesting, and the conversations that are going on around Labour, like our very own Emily put up an excellent thread on Blue Sky about this. That's kicking off a bit of a debate of what is a winning strategy for the opposition. Is it Chris Hipkins' plan to work the middle, or is it what someone like myself
It just sounds so wrong.
Well, that's what he's doing, right? He's working the middle.
Work the middle.
Work the middle. You're going to
Yeah.
work the middle. Or is it what someone like me and Emily and so many of our chat want, which is Labour to go further left, to become that workers' party that they're supposed to be?
But you know how they do that, eh? You know how they go further left? We have a big contingent.
They let the Greens do it.
They get a big contingency of Green votes and Te Pāti Māori votes. Been since our conversation, I'm like, well, imagine it was 10%, 10%, 30%. That's how you're going to pull Labour left. You're going to pull Labour left by the other two parties, just like the two smaller parties on the other side have pulled National right. Now, I feel quite confident and quite passionate about that, actually. And, you know, I don't know, Americans have all these names like leftist and progressive and, you know, whatever they call themselves. I don't know what I am. I sit on the left and I want the left to succeed, which means I want Labour to succeed. I want the Greens to succeed. I want Te Pāti Māori to succeed. But like you're just saying, Chewie, I want Labour to go a bit more to the left And the way they get through a few of those more leftist, like the other side's got through a few more rightist policies, is to have a decent size Te Pāti Māori and Green Party. That's how you do it.
Are they going to do that with a leader that is saying the Greens budget is unrealistic and fairy tale stuff?
Well, I think you might have
Are
seen
they
it
going to do it when he's turning around to coalition partners and saying that they're stupid, or that maybe Te Pāti Māori should focus on Māori women rather than the song and dance around the Privileges Committee?
Yeah, I think you'll see a change. Like if anything,
hope so.
Well, if anything about Chippy, I think he's a smart politician. I think he's a smart operator. People out there will think he's not left enough for them, whatever. But I think that, and look, we said this to Barb the other night. We said, tell Chippy to stop shitting on his coalition partners. When he gets asked a question, and I don't know what it was, but the next time he spoke about something to do with the Greens, Te Pāti Māori, he was non-committal. Perfect. Be non-committal. I don't know. That's their problem. Go talk to them. I don't know. I mean, like, if we were to get in a position to negotiate a government, we'll have those conversations in. I don't really have an opinion on it now. I wouldn't be, okay, mark my word, right? If he starts doing that, you heard it here, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if those words are getting through to him, because what he did with the Greens budget ended up on ACT's social media. And how does that make you someone who wants to build a coalition on the left? How does that make you someone who is going to then be in a position to be Prime Minister? It doesn't. It basically just gives the red meat to the base of the other side, and it gets them to paint you in exactly the way they want to.
We know that the way that this coalition is behaving is going to piss off the more liberal side of the voting base that voted for National. Like the ones that are like, well, maybe we'll give them a go. We've had 2 terms of Labour, and I didn't like that second lockdown very much, so I'm going to vote for National. Keep them honest. And they've got more than they ever thought. Or they've got, oh shit, this wasn't supposed to affect me. So maybe there is tactics in that. I can't say I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I like Hipkins. I honestly do. I think he's been a good minister when he's been in charge of stuff. He's a likable guy. We've enjoyed having him here on the show, and here we are arguing about his tactics. He's the leader of the Labour Party. He's a former Prime Minister. He might know more.
You think?
But he's not going for my vote, and he's not going to get it. So, but like you said, I can say that, I'm more or less in the bag for the Greens at this point. But the Greens aren't going to take the whole thing. I think in nobody's wildest dreams is that going to happen this time. Yeah. So we need Labour to win.
Yeah,
and that's where that comes from, is I'm like, I want more.
Yeah, we need them to be strong. Let's get on to the last part of this conversation, because the other thing that Moana talked about, or the article talked about, was the response in the House to the regulatory standards bill. This is only, I think, maybe 2 minutes. Let's have a listen to this last bit.
Redacted.
According to the ACT National Coalition Agreement, the two parties agreed to legislate to improve the quality of regulation, ensuring that regulatory decisions are based on principles of good lawmaking and economic efficiency by passing the Regulatory Standards Bill as soon as practicable.
What a bunch of fucking word salad that is. I mean, honestly, we're going to legislate to improve regulation to make sure regulation decisions are based on good lawmaking and regulations. I mean, honestly, the waffleness of that is concerning, because, yes, Chewie.
This is why they didn't want or they wanted to change the plain language legislation, which is another bill that they got absolutely spanked on by the public. 93% of the public submissions were against them repealing the plain language bill.
Yeah.
It's because they talk like this.
They want to improve the quality of regulation to ensure that regulation principles are used in good lawmaking by passing a regulation bill. You know, it's like
Regulation 3 times. Horrible.
Yeah, it's just what you can then do is read whatever you want into it. Sure, that sounds like, oh, well, yeah, we all agree that the quality of regulation should, we should have good quality regulation. What does that mean? Well, let's pass it first and then we'll explain it.
By passing the Regulatory Standards Bill as soon as practicable. During its first reading, Labour, Te Pāti Māori and Green MPs were passionate in their strong opposition.
This bill has failed 3 times already because no one was careless enough to let it through.
National and New Zealand First MPs spoke for less than a minute each. Casey Costello from New Zealand First suggested the bill is open to challenge.
We look forward to the process of the Select Committee and scrutinising the work that will be undertaken on this bill, and therefore New Zealand First support the Regulatory Standards Bill.
Dan Bidwell from National quoted a philosopher who urged legislative caution and then said,
Mr. Speaker, it is with that scepticism that we support this bill in the House.
So New Zealand First is saying we can push back against this. National is saying we're skeptical of this. And then they're both going, so let's pass it. You're like, honestly, I'm starting to think that David Seymour has naked photos of Luxon. Certainly something more that he can use against him than just, we'll overturn the election. Like, honestly, New Zealand First has said, don't know about this, let's pass it. National has said, don't know about this, let's pass it. What the fuck has Seymour got over them all? Like, honestly.
Yeah, well, this is the whole. We'll come back to something we've spoken to many, many times. This is gross. This is because Luxon is a poor negotiator.
Yeah.
It comes down to those initial coalition forming the government negotiations, and Luxon has let this and the Treaties Principle Bill through, 2 enormously dangerous, enormously divisive bills, because he wanted to be Prime Minister because he wants his knighthood. And this is part of it, right? It's part of the coalition agreement, so we've got to support it. Now, here's the thing that's catching me out, right, with that word salad that we read at the start. Treaties Principle Bill, part of the coalition agreement, was to support it to the first reading.
Yeah.
The wording on the other part was to support this all the way through.
As soon as practical.
Yeah. Which suggests to me, as much as these guys might be talking about skepticism and challenge, they have the votes to take this all the way through. Do they dare do that when they get flooded with submissions against it? And if it's anything like the Treaties Principle Bill, high quality submissions against it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really interesting point.
Because if you get 300,000 submissions and like 98% of them are people arguing passionately from an informed position about how bad this is, and you go, well, that's great. Thanks for sending in a submission. We've spent a lot of money reading them all, and they're in the bin now. But because an agreement was made in a hotel conference hall 3 years ago, we're going to pass it. How angry would you be? How angry would the electorate be? You're going to lose that election, definitely. And you might be looking at some pretty major disorder before that.
I'm also thinking there's these big things that are coming up, and even some that have supposedly gone, like Smoke Free 2025, going as in they were yesterday's passing, but there's Smoke Free 2025. There's the Treaty Principles Bill. There's this one. There's pay equity. and that with the People's Committee, these things aren't going to fall out of, how you were saying they front load all the bullshit, so then at the end of the election cycle they can ignore it. They're not going to be ignorable. I mean, I hope that People's Committee goes for a year, so it's the middle of next year and they're coming out with their results. And then, of course, put the regulatory standards bill in there. If these things are kept in, like that's why, what did we talk to Clint about? We had a bit of a conversation, and I had heard rumour about putting, it was the equal pay one, wasn't it? Trying to put it back to 2020 levels. There's this rumour going around Wellington about trying to go back to 2020 levels and getting it as a citizens initiated referenda, as a ballot on the election next year. So you'd go into the box and the first part of your ballot would be voting on these guys taking money off vulnerable women. That would be the first thing you do. And then you'd turn the page and then you'd vote for who you want to run the country. I mean, honestly, that would be the most incredible activism. I think that would be the cleverest, most impressive activism I've ever seen. An advert to remind you who these guys are in the polling booth. It would be unreal if that could get pulled off.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
This has got 45. We'll get to the end of it.
And my message to the public is clear. Submit to the Finance and Select
So he's even saying, we're not that sure about this, so make sure you submit. It's bizarre.
Committee. I look forward to hearing your submissions. I commend this bill to the House.
While the bill passed its first reading, perhaps there are some principles at stake.
We often call this principles-based regulation. So it's setting up a regulatory framework for making regulation. But the regulatory framework is biased, and even that assumes that people will comply with it. And we have a saying in this area of academia that principles-based regulation only works if those implementing it have principles.
So there you go, Chewie. I feel like we've kind of talked that whole thing out. Should we go to some chats, or do you want to add anything more to it?
Yeah, no, I just the sinking feeling of doom, because I must admit, I thought the agreement was to support it to the first reading, much the same as the Treaty Principles Bill. But if it is indeed supporting it all the way through, that is very, very bad.
And very different as well, eh?